welcome to everybody who's joined us this afternoon. I'm Alon Casudo. I'm CEO of the Zionist Federation of Australia, and it's a real pleasure to be able to have with us expert Yigal Palmor today at a most timely opportunity for today's webinar, which is really a deep dive into the geopolitical situation between Israel and Iran. And over the past week, we've witnessed quite a dramatic escalation in what's been a very long-standing tension between the West and Iran. And following last Friday's precision strikes by Israel on Iranian nuclear facilities, which is hard to believe was less than 10 days ago, as well as a range of other targets, including ballistic missile factories and launchers, including nuclear scientists, including IRGC military commanders. We have since seen early this morning that the United States launched a coordinated overnight operation targeting Natanz, Fordo, and Isfahan. And according to US officials, the attacks were highly successful and aimed at decisively degrading Iran's nuclear weapons capability. And the actions come in direct response to what we know is many decades of Iran's continued pursuit of nuclear arms, and of course, its long-standing support for terrorism across the region, including through proxies like Hamas and Hezbollah, who've been for decades terrorizing Israelis, but also Americans and Western targets across the world. And the scale and coordination of the strikes is a significant turning point in efforts to confront this Iranian threat. And as we begin this important conversation, I wanted to share with you also the official statement from the Zionist Federation of Australia, which has now been reported in a number of media outlets. So this was a statement by our president, Jeremy Liebler, who said, "The United States' precision strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities are a necessary and courageous response to an urgent threat. The Iranian regime has for years pursued nuclear weapons while sponsoring terrorism that has killed thousands of Israelis, Americans, and others across the world. Iran's actions are not just a danger to Israel, they are a clear and present threat to the West, to the international rules-based order, and we commend President Trump and the United States for their moral clarity and leadership in taking decisive action to prevent Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. The Zionist Federation of Australia stands in full solidarity with Israel and the United States and thanks all those working to confront the Iranian regime's aggression and protect global security. We hope that these actions help pave the way for a more stable and peaceful Middle East." I think this statement and I think this morning's events are really frame today's conversation, and the opportunity here is to both hear from Yigal Palmor, who's been an expert on these matters for decades, and also to have an opportunity to have an open and frank discussion through some Q&A. And I'm going to invite everyone to use the Q&A function in the webinar to pose their questions, and we're going to be asking Yigal those questions once he's finished addressing us. Now I want to invite Sarah Ribner, who's our head of mission from the Jewish Agency here in Australia, to introduce Yigal Palmor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alon, and thank you everybody for joining. Yigal is the head of International Relations Unit and Foreign Policy Advisor to the chairman at the Jewish Agency of Israel. We had previously served 4 years as Director of Public Affairs and Communications. Before joining the Jewish Agency back in 2014, he had been a diplomat for the past 28 years. In his last diplomatic position, he was the longest-serving spokesman and head press of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Israel from August 2008 till August 2014. Prior to doing this, he served in Israel's embassies in Madrid and in Paris, and served as Deputy Director of the European Institution Department. He was a spokesman for the Israeli delegations and a number of peace summits, including Casablanca and Cairo Regional Economic Summits. In February 2013, he was elected Best Government Spokesman in Survey of Israeli Journalists and Foreign Correspondents. He left the Foreign ministry in September 2014, and then joined the Jewish Agency in November of the same year, where he worked closely with agency's chairman Natan Sharansky, later chairman Isaac Herzog, and now Doron Almog. He's the initiator of the Diaspora's 2017 International Seminar, which brought together representatives from 30 governments to discuss a series of issues and challenges related to managing relations between countries and their national diasporas. You can imagine that Yigal has done so much more than that, but I will pass on the spotlight to Yigal to give us a little bit of an insight of what's been going on. Thank you, Yigal, for taking time to be with us. I can imagine it's a very busy schedule, and thank you for bringing your insight to the other side of the world in Australia.
Thank you for this introduction. But I'm befuddled not by the introduction, but by what happened last night, because most observers thought that this wouldn't happen, that the isolationists around Donald Trump would prevail, and that Donald Trump would cede to his isolationist tendency. And so, as we can see, observers and experts are more often than not wrong in their predictions. And as Abba Eban, the legendary Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel, once said, it's very difficult to make predictions, especially about the future. So I will try not to make any predictions, or maybe a few, but about the past. The recent past, first and foremost, let's remember that this confrontation between Israel and Iran did not start 10 days ago with Israeli bombings on Iranian nuclear and ballistic missile sites. It did not start on that day. Of course, it goes back a long, long way. If we're talking about the general hostility and confrontation, we can mention the bombing of the Israeli embassy in Buenos Aires back in 1992, and then 2 years later, the bombing of the Jewish Community Center, the AMIA, also in Buenos Aires. And then, of course, there are a lot more terror attacks directly by Iran, but mostly by its proxies, Hezbollah and Hamas. But the direct confrontation between Israel and Iran did not start, as I said, with Israeli bombings 10 days ago. It started on October 7th, and this is something that most observers and journalists tend to forget. On October 7th, we were attacked by one of the main Iranian proxies, by Hamas. On October 8th, we were attacked by Hezbollah, who followed suit. And then later, we were attacked by the Houthis from Yemen and by pro-Iranian militias in Syria and in Iraq. So Iran has attacked Israel since October 7th. And it wasn't that Israel had to confront these militias who have taken some initiative, God knows why. No, it was Iran behind all those attacks all along. Now, some people say, well, Hamas started the war without consulting with Iran, but Iran could have held them back. It could have held back Hezbollah, it could have held back all the others. It did not. And then last year, 2024, Iraq attacked Israel directly, not through proxies, on 2 occasions, in April and in October 2024. Iran has bombed Israel, has launched hundreds of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles, hundreds of drones on Israeli territory directly from Iran. So we are now not taking the initiative of attacking Iran out of the blue. We are responding to a lengthy and ongoing series of attacks, and Iran being behind them or directly launching them on Israeli territory. Now, it is interesting to note in this context that Iran has called its recent missile launching against Israel Operation Promise of Truth 3. So it is also clear for the Iranians that when they respond to Israeli attacks, it's not really a response, it's a continuation of a long-standing and ongoing operation against Israel. The missile launchings of last year were called Operation Promise of Truth 1 and then Promise of Truth 2. So even for the Iranians, it is clear that they are in war with Israel. They have been in war with Israel since October 7th. When people say you Israelis have attacked Israel for no reason, you have to remember that. And then, of course, we've heard the complaint that Israel has attacked a UN member state, and how can it be? And it's never happened in the past. And how can we bomb a UN member state without any reason? It hasn't. It's unacceptable, and so on. Let's remember that Iran is the only UN member state in the world that threatens another UN member state, Israel, of total destruction. There is no conflict regarding territory or borders. There are no claims or vindications by Iran to change borders or to claim territory. Iran is intent on destroying Israel altogether. And Israel is the only state in the world facing this kind of threat of total obliteration. So we are in a situation that does not resemble any other situation in the world, any other conflict. I might observe that Ukraine may face a similar threat because Russia Russia, at least by Putin's statement, Russia doesn't recognize Ukraine as a country and wants to annex the whole territory of Ukraine to Russia. But these statements have been somewhat unclear and inconsistent. So this may be another case of a country trying to destroy another country, but it does not resemble the situation with Iran because Iran's threat on Israel is nuclear. Iran has pursued a military nuclear program for years. We've been following that program. We have alerted the world. We have alerted the international agency, the International Atomic Energy Agency, for years and years. And not many countries have agreed to take action. I must say that some European countries have agreed to engage in discussions with Iran in order to limit its nuclear program to civilian needs only. Well, if you trust the Iranian regime, that was a good idea. But at least it's imposed some restrictions on the Iranian program, and it held it back to some extent for a number of years. But we have discovered through intelligence that Iran now has taken an ominous decision to run ahead with the development of its nuclear capacity, of its military nuclear capacity. Why the Iranians took this decision recently, we really don't know, but it had. And that meant that once Iran crossed the red line and would be able to equip itself with nuclear warheads, it would be too late for anyone to intervene. Iran would be a nuclear nation, just like all the other nuclear nations in the club. Those who are members of the permanent members of the Security Council, like the UN, and those who are not, like India, Pakistan, and North Korea, with the huge difference that Iran, like I said, is threatening Israel with destruction. Neither India nor Pakistan are threatening each other with total destructions. What they are doing is serious enough, but they don't threaten each other or any other country with total destruction. And well, North Korea is a difficult problem to solve, but they're not most of the time, they're not trying to destroy any other country. And this situation was different. The Iran situation is totally different. So we decided to take action before it would be too late. Now, to be completely honest, Israeli intelligence and American intelligence, because we're sharing all our intelligence with the US, and they're sharing intelligence. I can't say if it's all the intelligence, but they're sharing a lot with us. And experts on both sides agreed that there are clear signs that Iran has taken the decision, it has crossed the red line, and it would become militarily nuclear in a very short time. There was no consensus. It's true. Some experts thought that more information was needed before we could determine with absolute certainty that Iran was taking these steps to become nuclear with military capacity. But the understanding in Israel was that if we waited for absolute certainty, that meant one thing, that it was too late. And we can't afford to be too late on that threat. We just can't afford it. So we decided to take action now before it would be too late. You know, absolute certainty would mean that Iran detonated the nuclear engine, that it would have already a nuclear bomb, then we would have 100% certainty. But what would we do with that? That would be way too late. So we decided to take action right now. And I must say something about the performance of Israeli intelligence and American intelligence. They are among the best, if not the best, in the world, but American intelligence failed on 9/11 and Israeli intelligence failed on October 7th. Intelligence is not infallible. So we need to work with a certain degree of uncertainty and to work with what we have, to trust what we have with plausible certainty. And if people tell us, well, you weren't absolutely sure, that's true, but that's how intelligence works. And in this case, it was a case of life and death to our country. So we couldn't afford to wait for an absolute and total verification of everything. Now, the objective of the Israeli airstrikes was to destroy two systems. One, the nuclear research system, the military nuclear system, and the other was the ballistic missiles assembly lines and construction sites, the whole industry of ballistic missiles. The nuclear system had to be destroyed because Iran was enriching uranium to military level. And that was the clear indication that they were pursuing a bomb and not just civilian nuclear research for peace, as they had claimed. If you want to use nuclear power for electricity, for example, or for medical research, you don't enrich uranium to 90% level. And once you do that, then there can't be any doubt at all about your intentions. So we needed to destroy all the enrichment facilities and also all the the industrial system with which they built the components of a detonator and an assembly of a nuclear bomb. It's very complicated technically to understand all the minute details of that assembly chain, so we will not go into that. There is no reason. Besides, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a physicist, so I will not pretend to explain all the minute details. I've heard it so many times before. I think I have some simplified understanding of the system, but it's really simplified. You need a certain number of components to make the nuclear engine detonate over a destination where you want it and when you want it. And this system had to be destroyed. And once you do have a nuclear detonator, you need to create a warhead and to be able to equip a missile, a ballistic missiles with the nuclear warhead. That is not as simple as it may sound. And once you do that, you need to build a missile that can carry the nuclear warhead to destination, and you need to ensure that the warhead explodes at the right time and at the right place. So it's a very complicated system. And Iran was engaging in research, and construction of all parts and all components of that system. That's why we believe that we had enough certainty, more than plausible. We had enough certainty that they were pursuing to build a bomb, nothing less than a bomb, and they were now accelerating the process. They were supposed to be able to reach effective level within weeks. The destruction by air bombing targeted both the nuclear program, the enrichment, and all the facilities with all the necessary components to assemble a warhead, and then all the missile industry, which is of course not concentrated on one site. All those facilities are dispersed all around Iranian territory, and sometimes they're built underground on mountainside to make it very difficult to be bombed. It was really a military feat to be able to target and destroy, at least partially, all those facilities. Now, there was one major facility that the Israeli Air Force could not destroy. It could damage to some extent, but it could not destroy. And that was at a place called Fordow. That's where the facility was built, I think 40 or 60 meters underground on a mountainside. Like I said, very difficult to reach. And it was the major facility of not just enrichment, uranium enrichment, but also of building certain crucial, critical components for the bomb. This is when we needed the Americans to intervene. Like I said, we could have damaged the facility in a very serious way, but if we wanted the Iranian program to be rolled back for years, for a significant number of years, we needed the Americans to intervene with their bunker buster bombs. And this is what happened tonight. So although it's too early to assess the damage that was caused to all the facilities, first and foremost to Fordow, and although it is too early to determine whether stockpiles of missiles and stockpiles of enriched uranium have been destroyed, and maybe also centrifuges and other types of parts of the assembly chain and research chain, we believe that serious damage was done, enough to roll back the program for years. And when we're asked what would prevent the Iranians from repairing all the facilities, rebuilding everything, and starting all over again, my only answer is probably nothing, but it would take him a long time, enough for the international community to impose very restrictive sanctions, or maybe a change of opinion at the top of the regime after all the damage has been done, and maybe they would agree to sign a very restrictive treaty that would allow Israel and the whole Middle East to be safer for a number of years. What could happen a few years from now? Nobody knows. Like I said at the beginning of my talk, I will not make predictions about the future. But another very important development of the recent days was deterrence. Will the Iranians take the chance of being bombed again the way they've been bombed now by Israel and now by the US? I think that one main result of the current operation, one that cannot be measured with numbers, is that Israel and the US have gained a huge amount of deterrence all around the Middle East. The exploits and feats of the Israeli Air Force with the Mossad and the determination of the US, I think, will make everyone think twice or thrice, or even more than that, before they engage in any in any initiative to build or rebuild a nuclear weapon. I think deterrence worked when the West bombed Libya and caused the regime change. But it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough for Iran because its leaders believe that they can rebuild not just anything that will be damaged by Israel, but also they will return to power and glory of the historical Iranian Empire. We know that for a fact. It's not my metaphor. We know that this is the conversation among the top level of Iranian officials, including the Ayatollah Khamenei, who is the leader of the Islamic Republic. So we hope to have gained enough deterrence and enough rolling back of the program so that in coming years we will be able to install an international system that will prevent Iran from becoming nuclear again. Would there be a regime change? It would be a bonus, but that's not the direct objective of the operation right now. So
Yigal,
thank you for listening if you're still here, and I'm open to take questions.
Yigal, we've got over 130 people still here, so clearly what you are saying is of great interest. And I'm curious, one of the questions that has come up, and it's one that's on my mind as well. You spoke about deterrence, and without doubt, Israel's persistent campaign against Iran and its proxies has been incredibly successful. You know, there's been a decimation of Hezbollah and Hamas's top leadership, as well as the IRGC, Iranian nuclear scientists, really, you know, some incredible successes, which we are all very much aware of. And yet, with the overnight strikes by the US and Fordow being hit, we've still seen Israelis wake up this morning to one of the most devastating barrages of rockets that we've seen. And I'm curious, in the context of deterrence, is it that deterrence is there's both a long-term and short-term dynamic to deterrence? How do we explain this kind of barrage of rockets after both Israel and the US seem to have had such enormous success against Iran in the past over the past week, and yet Iran, you know, is still capable of launching these missiles?
Yes, deterrence doesn't mean that they will immediately raise the white flag. They had to respond automatically, immediately, to show that they're still standing. And there was a barrage, but uh, it hurts me to say this. It wasn't exceptional. It hurts me to say this because people were affected and buildings were damaged, and maybe I know there are injured. Maybe there are casualties. I don't know at this point. So I don't want to sound as if I'm being relativistic and saying, oh well, there are casualties, but no, casualties are something that we cannot accept. But if you take a look at the overall situation, they have fired a number of missiles, not more than they fired in the past few days. They had to show that they're still there. No one has started the negotiating process for the time being, and they need to show that they have the capacity to fire missiles. But will they start all over again with the nuclear program? That's the real question. Okay, once they have exhausted all the stockpiles of missiles, will they start rebuilding ballistic missiles? That's the real question. We're looking at the future. This war is not ended. It will end with some kind of arrangement or agreement, and deterrence will work for the future and for the serious threats that we cannot accept. That's how I see it. Not for the next few days.
Thanks, Igan. Another question from David Schulberg is when Iran attacked Israel last year, and we remember in April there were over 400 missiles fired and many other drones and other weapons. We didn't see the kind of damage that we're seeing this time around. What is it that's changed? Is it their capabilities? Is it our ability to defend and to block them? What's different this time compared to April last year?
So two things. Last year, we had the benefits of assistance from other countries to intercept the incoming missiles and drones. Um, the UK, France, and probably also Jordan helped us to intercept all the incoming missiles. We don't have that now. For a number of reasons, we can only rely on the US to assist us in interception. So more missiles and more drones can penetrate Israeli territory. That's one thing. The other thing is that Iranians are now using multiple head missiles. So instead of having just one warhead per missile, they have the Scud of missile that carries a number of smaller warheads which disperse all around when reaching the ground, causing much wider damage. And this is very difficult to counter. It's a new kind of threat. I have no idea if Iran experts here expected that, if they knew that Iran had this kind of weapon. But at the same time, we are looking for answers. And meanwhile, every missile that hits the ground here causes more damage than the missiles last year.
Thanks so much, Yigal. I'm interested for a moment in kind of zooming out because in order for us to be where we are today and having the conversation we're having, many constellations have to have aligned. Namely, we needed to remove the threat of Hezbollah from Israel's northern border. We knew that Assad as well was a stronghold of that proxy that Iran had built, and now his rule of Syria is gone. We know that the Russians were big backers of Iran and supplied them with surface-to-air missiles, with a lot of their technology. And the Russians are preoccupied with the Ukraine. And of course, we have President Trump, and with a different administration in the White House, we might have had a very different dynamic altogether in the region. And so, in a sense, there's this kind of series of different constellations. And for you, I'm curious as both a diplomat and someone who looks at the geopolitical dynamic with such intent. How much of this was by design? How much of it was fortune? How much of it was in any way predictable? And how much of it is kind of catching you as someone who's been following this space so intently by surprise?
As the international ecosystem has changed and it has provided us with a window of opportunity. Absolutely. So I think that what we could say happened by design is the total defeat of Hezbollah. One could not have predicted 2 years ago that Israel would attack Iran and Hezbollah would just issue a statement that condemns Israel more or less in the same language as the UN, with more or less the same cliches, and it would not fire even one bullet. That is absolutely mind-boggling, and it is due to Israel's operation against Hezbollah, starting with the famous Beeper operation, that they're not likely to forget anytime soon, followed by other strikes that has brought Hezbollah to the ground. And now Hezbollah has been set up in Lebanon by Iran precisely for this moment when Israel would attack Iran and Hezbollah would be Iran's shield. Hamas also, but mostly Hezbollah. And now Hezbollah is gone to all practical effects. That has been done by design. Change of regime in Syria was totally unpredictable, but very helpful, absolutely. And the international community, well, some people are surprised by Putin's approach and others are not. Not only is he more busy in Ukraine than one would have thought, but he's stepping back from his historical support to Iran. He has even proposed to mediate between Israel and Iran. We're not taking that seriously. Putin is not the person who will mediate, but still, that is the official position of Russia. That's very surprising. The American president is of course, very understanding and helpful. I don't need to prove that, not today, not this morning. And Europe, well, Europe will be Europe. We're very disappointed with the UK position. We are mildly disappointed with France. Some say that this was expected, others say that this has gone too far. And it's not always easy to read President Macron's intentions because he's making very confusing statements. But we have Germany's staunch and strong support, more than even we expected, more than the most optimistic expected. So we have this international situation which we have support by those who count, and also some of those who count are not holding us back. And those who should have supported Iran are not really voicing their support more than just a few statements. So it's a bit by design, but also a lot of opportunity. Of course, we have nothing to do with the war in Ukraine or with the American elections. But again, the stars have aligned in such a way that it has provided us with a window of opportunity to strike precisely when things became really dangerous in Iran.
Yigal, thank you. We've got another question from John Searle, who asks, President Trump has given this ultimatum. It's now peace, or else the US will attack again, and it will be severely more impactful than what has been happening to date. And Iran has now responded with a barrage of missiles. So where does this leave Israel and the US in terms of that ultimatum and what the next steps are?
I think that what Trump aspires to achieve is to sign an agreement with Iran, not to engage in additional military action, certainly not boots on the ground, but no more airstrikes. I think he hopes to bring Iran to the negotiating table now to agree to a very restrictive agreement regarding the nuclear program, and he will be happy with that. What will the Iranian regime agree to? I have no idea, but obviously, if the US and Iran reach such an agreement, this will satisfy Israel, and we will, in coordination with the US administration, presidency, of course, we will cease the strikes, even though this is not a coordinated war, but there's a lot of coordination and understanding and deploying military efforts. So I think that diplomacy will also be coordinated to a large extent. And what Israel and the US are aspiring to achieve is this restrictive agreement. And that will be the end, I believe, of this round of fighting. Otherwise, there will be more rounds. Can Iran sustain more attacks? That remains to be seen. But let's wait and see. I think Trump is now extending his hand. Let's see if Iran takes it.
And Igal, this is an adaptation of Shoshana Kosinski's question. There seems to have been a lot of theatrics and deception and diversion going on in order to lull Iran into a false sense of confidence or security, whether that be Trump saying it's 2 weeks until a decision, or B-2 bombers going in the opposite direction to Fordow, and various others. I'm curious, um, what's the role of kind of deception? Because for many years it was the Iranians who were kind of the master deceivers of the world in terms of claiming that they were seeking nuclear abilities for peaceful purposes, and that they had no intent on any kind of violence or unsettling the Middle East. And here we are seeing the West for, in a very kind of clever way, employing those same tools of deception, but in a masterful way. So I'm just curious, how are you observing all this play out? And is this a new thing, or has it always been happening? It's just the first time we're seeing it at such a level.
I think it's the first time we've seen it at such a level. Prime Minister of Israel, American president. We have never seen deception against an enemy at that level. And at the military level, it's always been there. It's always been there. And on a tactical level, it was played on the ground. Again, I will refer to the Beeper operation, but again, in other operations. If you remember the slogan of Mossad, the slogan that appears on their logo, it says in Hebrew, "B'tachbulot ta'aseh lecha milchama," you shall wage war by deception or by tricks, if I'm to translate it very quickly. It has always been the way of Mossad to fight enemies by deception. And I'm sure the Americans have always used that as well at that level. Again, there has never been such a, how will I put it, such a spectacular use of deception at the highest political level. This is quite new in international affairs, not just when it comes to Israel and the US. What it will mean in the future, I don't know, because people or countries or diplomatic services all around the world will be less inclined to believe leaders in both our countries on crucial issues when they make statements. That's obvious. But, well, here we are, engaged in a battle of deception against our fiercest enemy and taking them by surprise. Surprise is one of the most effective weapons in war. And everyone who has been involved either on a university level or on the field in fighting and in warfare knows that. So we have now used it effectively against the Iranians, who have always been masters of deception, and I think they can't believe their eyes. How long will it take us? How far will it take us? That remains to be seen. But yes, there is this phenomenon now that will serve as material for doctoral thesis for years and years, from now.
Thank you. Now, to bring another voice into the mix, I want to invite Leora Miller to come and join us. And so, Leora, you can ask your question as well now.
Thanks so much. And thank you for this presentation, Yigal. I'm wondering whether you think, so it's been established that Trump and Netanyahu had discussions about this a few hours before the bombing started. Do you think Trump would have made it a condition to Netanyahu that the war in Gaza end in the very near future as part of their agreement to go ahead and bomb?
I would say that it's possible. It's possible. I can't rule out that this was indeed what Trump demanded, but there's nothing at all to confirm this thesis. We don't know. We really don't know. Nothing has filtered through their offices. There hasn't been any off-the-record briefing on that, and we really don't know. I think it's possible. President Trump is totally unpredictable. Everybody knows that. I'm not the first one to say it. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. But also, on the other hand, Trump may have completely forgotten about Gaza with this Iran war that brings him more media attention than he would ever dream of, if you see what I mean. So maybe he thinks that Gaza is a minor front that can be overlooked now. That would also be a possibility that I cannot rule out. So we have two options here, and we have no sign whatsoever of what could have been the content of the conversation. Maybe something will be leaked in the next few days that will give us some indications, but for the time being, it's anybody's guess.
Thanks so much, Yigal. We've got another question from Katie Sayer, which is similar to a question that Gil Dvir is asking as well, which is now that it would appear Iran has been severely um, diminished in terms of a threat to the region and to Israel, and hopefully with the possibility of peace with the Saudis in the future. All eyes seem to be turning to Turkey as kind of the next major threat or challenge to Israel, and especially with President Erdogan's increasing anti-Israel rhetoric, which we saw even in the last few days, is getting sharper and sharper. What does this look like in terms of the future of this new front? Israel and Turkey, there were times where they had relatively good relations, and it seems to have deteriorated quite significantly. And of course, there's the other dynamic with Turkey entering Syrian spaces, Turkey's ongoing conflict with the Kurds, etc. So I'm curious, as you look at this, and presumably you've had kind of multiple decades of looking at the Turks through different lenses, how do you think of Israel and Turkey over the next, call it, few decades?
So let's look at reality on the ground. I'm no fan of President Erdogan. You might have suspected that, but he has not severed diplomatic ties with Israel. Yes, we have called home our ambassador from Ankara and our consul general in Istanbul. That's true. And the Turks have called back their ambassador in Tel Aviv. That's true. But we have still officially diplomatic relations. On the other, and to add to that, we are getting okay, I mean, it has been published, so I can speak about this openly. Um, we get our oil from Azerbaijan, a very close ally of Turkey. The oil pipe goes all the way from Azerbaijan to a Turkish seaport on the Mediterranean. And we are still allowed to send tankers to that port to get oil coming from Azerbaijan through an oil pipe that goes through Turkish territory. They could have just, shut the faucet and leave us without oil, but they don't. They don't. And Erdogan's opposition has been signaling this double talk as they see it. And Erdogan has answered them, but he still leaves the oil pipe working. So we have that. Also, Turkey and Azerbaijan are very close allies, as I said, and Israel has become one of Azerbaijan's closest ally in recent years. We've been selling defense systems to Azerbaijan, which proved themselves to be decisive in its war with Armenia, which is something that we can lament. But still, Azerbaijan owes us a lot and makes it known that they are our friends. It's no secret. Some observers have said that Israeli covert operations are based covert operations against Iran are based on Azerbaijan territory. I have no information to confirm that. I'm just quoting some experts I rely on in the media. So we have this very complex system of regional alliances in which Turkey is closer to Israel than one might have expected. And I believe that we can reach arrangements, maybe not friendship, certainly not under Erdogan, but we can reach a number of arrangements with Turkey, such as the arrangements we have reached in Syria, in the new Syria, to prevent unnecessary clashes between the Turkish military presence and the Israeli military presence on Syrian territory and in the Syrian airspace. There are understandings. So Turkey is not like a new Iran for Israel. It does not threaten Israel with obliteration and destruction. and it knows how and when to reach pragmatic arrangements with Israel. I believe I would not say this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. We've already had that friendship in the past, and we may return to that phase sometime after Erdogan. And right now, there is a useful relationship, and I believe we should keep our eyes on that when we speak about Turkey.
Thanks so much, Yigal. There's been kind of conflicting messages around the future of the Iranian regime and what are, Israel and the US's intentions there. That on the one hand, it hasn't been an actual objective of the military operations, not the Israeli or the US, to remove the Khamenei regime or the IRGC from power. And on the other hand, we've heard Minister of Defense Katz and others speak about the fact that their days may be numbered and that he doesn't see a future for them. And so I'm curious, what is the idea generally in terms of both within, I suppose, the upper brass of the military, within the diplomatic circles around the future of the regime? And if the regime survives but is toothless, is that better than the alternative, which is something that might be unknown?
So let me say this very clearly. Regime change is not an objective of this operation. If you ask the top brass of the army, they will say it very clearly. They can't express their opinion on this openly because the Minister of Defense makes contradictory statements. But since I can speak freely and I'm not an official spokesman anymore, I can tell you that people who really are in the know do not treat Minister Katz's statement with highest esteem, if you see what I mean. Okay? So no regime change. Of course, if it happens spontaneously because Iranians take to the streets and topple the regime, that would be fine. That's up to them. Can it happen now? We have no idea. We don't have necessary information or intelligence to make these statements. And the bombings, as you know, target military facilities. Here and there, some civilian facilities, such as the official TV, because there was a strategic reason to destroy a number of facilities who were helping the Revolutionary Guards to communicate. But it's not, let me repeat this, it has not and is not a target of the military operation, regardless of what some okay, I will not add any adjectives, regardless of what some Israeli politicians may say to the local media in order to gain some points with their political base.
Thanks so much, Yigal. Um, a peculiar phenomenon, and I'm not sure whether there are any logical answers to this, but over the past 10 days since Israel started its offensive against Iran, and since we've seen really most of Israel come to a standstill, or large parts of Israel come to a standstill, the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange continues to show green day after green day after green day. I'm curious, how is the Israeli economy, home front, standing up to this? How is it possible that the stock exchange is showing green days when there is a war going on and half of Israel is
Right.
in bomb shelters? And I'm just curious, what does it feel like on the ground in terms of people's businesses, livelihoods, day to day?
Yeah, it's a very good question. But let me just complete my answer to your last question. Uh, if people want to know what the targets are and whether regime change is one of them, they should stick to the statements by the prime minister. And the prime minister has clearly said that regime change is not one of the objectives. So stick to that and ignore all the other statements.
Okay.
That's what I have to say. And now, as to the economy, you should read the economic supplements of the Israeli papers. Everybody's asking that question. Investors are very optimistic about the day after. The more buildings are destroyed, the more people are convinced that the government will pour a lot of money in reconstruction, which will energize not just the building sector, not just the real estate sector, but other sectors as well. People are optimistic about removing the Iranian threat, and as a result, improving Israel's economic position in the world and the trust that foreign investors might manifest in investing in Israel, because Israel will be less threatened. We may even see that our international standing will be improved, and not just the defense industry, which obviously has now shown its capacity and will probably expand in more markets, but also other sectors which will gain from an improved feeling of safety. And I think that this optimism is driving the markets upward. Will it be so or not? Nobody knows. But I think that what we've been witnessing through the markets is an absolute and undefeatable optimism of Israeli investors. And I hope they know something that the rest of the world doesn't. It has been like that in the past. So maybe this time this optimism will prove itself again.
Thank you so much, Yigal. I'm mindful of time and I want to respect your time and everyone else's time. But if there was one kind of strong message you could leave us on in terms of what we have potentially got to look forward to, and what does the future hold in terms of us who hold our breath every time we hear Israel is under attack, us who hope that our friends and loved ones in Israel are okay, that the hostages come home, and of course that we are able to come and visit soon. What would be your kind of message to the Australian Jewish community and everyone who's locked on?
I would say this: talk to your friends and to your families in Israel, and get a sense of the wide-ranging and deep-reaching resilience of Israelis from all walks of life. This is something that has been observed by foreigners as well, but I can tell you that by living here, by experiencing it, you have to be held in awe. We are being targeted by the largest country in the region, which has been a threat for years and years, and we are suffering damages and casualties, and yet talk to people and feel the resilience. Israelis abroad who have been stuck abroad are making tremendous efforts to return home, and their friends abroad cannot understand this. Your country is under attack with missiles all over the place from north to south, and instead of taking advantage of being abroad, being in safety, and letting this play through, no, you're making huge efforts to return to the country while it is at war. How can that be understood? I remember back in 1991 when Israel was under missile fire from Iraq, from Saddam Hussein's Iraq, and Israelis did everything to return to Israel as soon as possible. I was posted in Spain at the time, and I remember a Spanish friend telling me that they couldn't understand, they couldn't grasp what this meant. They offered their friends who were staying in Madrid and Barcelona to stay with them while the fighting was going on. And no, the Israeli friends wanted to return home as soon as possible, and they couldn't understand it. The same is going on now. Take a look at these tens of thousands of Israelis uh, going home by all possible means. And this means that we have faith. We have faith in the country. We have faith in the country's future. And we are resilient. So if you need reasons for optimism, these are the reasons.
Thank you so much, Yigal. Thank you for your expertise. Thank you for your optimism, and thanks for sharing your time with us. I know that there were 1,001 reasons to cancel today's webinar, with really most of Israel being in bomb shelters over the past few hours, and we're eternally grateful that you made the time for this conversation. So on behalf of the Zionist Federation and the 140 plus people who joined us online, thank you again. And we hope that there are peaceful times soon. And of course, that our hostages return home as well. Thank you so much, Yigal, and thank you everyone else for joining us.
Thank you.